Hi, hello, and if you're new to the channel, welcome, and if you've been here before, welcome back. Now, the diesel saga on board my narrowboat, the Grey Wagtail, continues. Back in the winter, I took some samples from the tank and I was quite disappointed on how they looked. So I've got them here, I've kept them. These have been sort of sitting around for several months now. Now, this is the one from one of the tanks, and it's sort of, it's red, it's diesel colored, it looks like diesel, which is fantastic because it's red diesel we use in narrowboats. And if you give it a swirl, you get a little bit of stuff coming up off the bottom, but it doesn't look too bad. The other sample, which came from the main fuel tank, was this horrible sort of orangey color, much lighter, and it's sort of hazy as well. It just doesn't look right. Now, interestingly, I've kept these two samples now for a couple of months, I guess, and this one's been getting lighter as time's gone on. I mean, I don't know why, but it is getting lighter. I don't know if it's becoming more oxidized or what the story with it is. But anyway, it is becoming lighter. So what I'm going to do in this video is take some new samples from the tank. I had a winter fuel run, so I've got fresh diesel in one of the tanks, and the main fuel tank is the diesel I've had in it all this time. Take fresh samples of it and have a look at it in closer detail. I've got a few tests and things that I want to run on it. I've sort of done a deep dive into this online, and there's various things you can do to try and work out what's going wrong with the diesel. So if you want to know about diesel, please stick around. Okay, so time to collect some samples, and here I'm collecting diesel samples from the side tank. This is the main tank that fuels the engine. Okay, so that was me taking samples from the tanks, and it was a bit of a surprise because basically what happened was my red diesel in one of the tanks came out red again, which is just as I was expecting. It's got a little bit lighter over time. It may be the glass jar that's caused it, but this is the new red diesel that I had put in a few weeks back. And yeah, I took a sample from the bottom of the tank. There's a few lumps and bumps in there, but nothing too much, and it's the sort of right color. Now, as you remember from a few minutes ago, when I took the sample out of the other tank, it was this sort of horrible orange color, and it's not a case of contaminated jam jar. I washed both these jam jars out thoroughly before I used them, so it's not the jam jar that's causing them, but it was this sort of light orangey color with sort of a haziness. And much to my surprise, when I took diesel out of that tank again, it came out the right color. There's still a slight haze to it compared to the fresh diesel in the other tank, but it's the right color. It's nowhere near as cloudy. And I did take it from the very bottom of the tank again. I got a hose right the way down in there and took a sample from as low as I could within the tank. So I don't know. This is very odd. Anyway, I'm still going to run a few tests on it that I've discovered on the internet to see what's sort of going on with it. May give me some answers, may not. So stick around to find out. Well, they say you can take the scientist out of the lab, but you can't take the science out of the scientist. Well, I don't actually know anybody that does say that, but you get the idea. Once a scientist, always a scientist. So here's my samples. These are the main samples from the main tank. These are from the back tank, and these are the two old samples that I've already mentioned. That's from the back tank, and this orangey stuff was from the main fuel tank. Now, one of the tests that they have said that you can do is to give it a shake. Very simple test. Give it a shake and see if it forms foam. Now, it should form foam, but it should go quite quickly. So giving main tank a good shake. Yes, it's forming foam. And that's not sort of hanging around, that's going sort of quite quickly. So that's a good sign. If that foam was really sort of thick and sort of hung around, that could suggest contamination with bacteria. That'd be the sort of proteins from the bacteria being released, etc. But yeah, that's not too bad. Not too bad at all. So that looks okay. Let's try the back tank. Oh, that one's a bit more foamy. Yes, that one's much more foamy. It's interesting. Give that front tank a shake again. Oh no, maybe about the same. Yep, it's going quite quickly. The back tank is more foamy, which is kind of interesting. The main tank, not so foamy. If I do that with the original samples that I took, the yellow sample, very foamy. Yeah, much more foamy, and that seems to be taking a little bit longer to go. And the back tank, yeah, the foam is hanging around, but these have been sort of sitting there all winter, well, for 2 or 3 months. That foam is hanging around a bit longer. The main tank, all the foam's gone now, and the back tank, it's pretty much gone. So I think that's good. So another thing that was suggested to try is taking some samples of the diesel and putting it onto a white background, a white towel, and letting it dry to see what sort of stain you get. So this is main, and it's a new sample. So this is what I call the side tank or the main tank. This is the new back tank. And then just for completeness, I will take the old sample that I took from the back tank. And also the problematic diesel. And I will just leave those to dry and see what sort of staining I get on that paper towel. Now, another test that's been suggested is to simply smell it. That's the main tank. And to me, they smell identical. No difference in the smell there at all. So another test to try is sticking a sample in the fridge and leaving it and seeing if it clouds up overnight. So I am going to do that. So another test to do, or another thing to try, is filtering. And I was going to filter some of the main tank material into this clean jam jar here, but I really don't think there's any point because there's not any obvious particulates in there. So I don't think filtering it is going to tell me anything. The idea being is if it come out this sort of orangey colour, then I would filter it to see if I could remove the haze, just passing it through a coffee filter, but I'm not going to do that. Now, a final thing I want to try is adding some of this sort of diesel bug treatment, because I thought that was possibly the problem that I was facing. This is a sort of diesel bug sort of general sort of treatment from Marine 16. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a main sample, call that treated, and I'm going to take a back sample and just add a small amount. It's a sort of 1 in 1,000 dilution that we're looking for here according to the material on this. So it's a very small amount. I'm just going to add a drop into each one. So 1 drop into that sample. Doesn't seem much, but that's going to be about 1 in 1,000 dilution there. And then 1 drop into this. Oh, 2 drops into that. So for completeness, I just better add 2 drops into, another drop into that one. There we go. They've both now had exactly the same amount of the treatment. And then just leave that and see what happens. So I've run the paper test, and the sort of results from that were there was no sort of staining on that white paper towel, which is actually a little bit odd, because if the diesel was fine, I should see a very light yellow stain, but I couldn't even sort of see a yellow stain on it. If there'd been a slight tan ring around the sort of edge of where the drops spread out, that could indicate sort of mild oxidation of the diesel, so that would be a problem. If I'm left with a sort of dark brown sticky patch, then that could indicate that I've got sort of the formation of gums and these sort of varnishes. And if I sort of ended up with sort of really sort of gloopy, horrible thing, then that would be really, really problematic. The fuel would be fully degraded and there's really nothing we can do about it. So the diesel's passed the paper test. But what about the other tests that I performed, that foam shaking test, and also leaving the samples overnight, putting them in the fridge, etc.? What do they tell us about the diesel? Well, looking at the samples in the jars, the diesel should be a clear, bright colour. That's a good diesel. If it's cloudy, like in that sort of orange sample, the one that I collected way back in the winter, then that suggests sort of water contamination, but it doesn't separate out, so that doesn't suggest that it's water contamination. I've got a little bit of sort of material accumulating at the bottom, but in the jar it's sort of not a huge amount, and even the samples that I've left over the winter period haven't sort of grown a ton of bugs, so I don't think it's that. I'm certainly not sort of seeing any sort of stringy slime sort of formation of biofilms in there in the samples that I've kept for a long time. And there's nothing sort of dropping out. There's no water dropping out or no other particles dropping out, so I don't think that there's a problem there. Now, a very simple test that you can do is just to sniff it, and I've sniffed it. And fresh diesel should sort of smell slightly oily, which it does. It should be a little bit like paraffin, which it kind of smells a little bit like paraffin. And bad diesel should smell more like varnish or paint thinners or old engine oil, and it certainly doesn't smell like any of those. And even on the fingers, it doesn't feel sticky in any way. It just feels sort of like diesel fuel. So if I sort of get a little drop on my fingers from the fresh diesel, that feels exactly the same as from the sample that I took from the bottom of the tank. So I don't think there's a problem there. So the sort of finger tackiness test, if you like, it doesn't feel sticky. It just feels like what I guess diesel should feel like. So I don't think that that's a problem there. So what about that sort of shake test? Well, the shake test, the bubbles sort of formed briefly and were gone within sort of 5 or 10 seconds. So I don't think there's an issue there. That sort of suggests that there's no problem with the diesel. The foam certainly didn't last for minutes, and there was sort of no streaking down the side of the vessel. So again, I don't think that indicates any problem. So all the tests that I've run seem to suggest that the diesel is fine. And that leaves me with a problem. Why was that first sample that I took from the main fuel tank an orange colour and cloudy? And I've thought about this and I've come to one quite horrifying conclusion. Well, there's two possibilities. One, the glass jar was contaminated, and I don't think that was the case. Both jars were washed out at the same time, cleaned and dried, and so I don't think it's contamination in the jar. And it was that orange colour as soon as it went in there, and it was cloudy as soon as it went in there, so I don't think it's the jar. What I think it might be, and this has led me down a completely false path with this problem, what I think it might be is the pump that I used to extract the diesel. The first time I used it was on the side tank to take that sample, the main tank. And the problem is, that was the first time the pump was used. So maybe there was something in the pump, a lubricant or contaminant, that has got into the diesel. So this whole thing about orange cloudy diesel has been, pardon the sort of, is it a pun? I don't know, but pardon the sort of semi-pun, I guess, a red herring. Because there's possibly not a serious problem with the diesel. Yes, it's a little bit sticky. Yes, it is gumming up the fuel injector pump, and that's caused problems there with the stop solenoid, but I don't think it's a major issue. So what am I going to do now? Well, my initial thinking on seeing that orange diesel was that the diesel was really bad in the tank and I needed to have all of it pumped out, disposed of, and fresh diesel put in once the tank had been cleaned, and I was going to have a hole cut in the tank so we could get in there and give it a really good clean. Now I don't think that needs to be done. Interestingly, I was having real problems finding a company to do that anyway. So what I think I'm going to do is take the boat down to Thule's boat yards down in Banbury and get the diesel polished. I've already had one company come here and try and polish the diesel, but they couldn't actually get their hoses into the tank. So I'll take it down to Tooley's and see if they can do the job down there. Get that booked in sometime in the next month or so. So anyway, that's the long sort of weird protracted story with my diesel. All started with trying to have the engine serviced and it not starting. Then I had all that hassle with getting the injector pump sorted out and degummed. That sort of sorted that out, which was great. And then I took the diesel sample, and as I said earlier, I think that the problem with the diesel is not the diesel itself, but the pump that I used to extract the diesel. I think there was something in that pump or the tubing that has contaminated it and given me that orange diesel, which is really annoying because I've been worried about this and trying to resolve it for months now. Anyway, if you found that interesting, informative, please give it a big thumbs up, a big like. And if you want to, please click that hype button. There's a new hype button that you can click, which really helps the sort of video get out there and be seen by people. And so if you could click that like button and the hype button, I'd really appreciate it. And if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing. Now on the screen, you'll see a QR code. If you scan that QR code, that will take you through to a link about the Grey Wagtail, my narrowboat. It's a newsletter, it's free. I don't bombard you with emails. I just send out an email every so often sort of saying there's a new video out, so once a week, and possibly sometimes I might send out some other material, but not a huge amount. I certainly won't be spamming you, so please consider scanning that QR code. Anyway, thanks for watching for this long. Bye for now.